Philosophy and science did not end with Thales and his proposal for water. We're not. It wasn't. It was a nice start, but not quite, didn't get us all the predictive power we wanted. But along came another naturalist, another philosopher named Anaximander, and Anaximander is the successor to Thales. Some say that he was his student. And following Thales, he looks for again explanations of nature. It's recorded that he was, like Thales, a student and observer of astronomy, and he accepts Thales' material monism. He's a material monist. There's only one kind of thing making up the universe. Now, the question is, okay, so how is he different? He's different from Thales in that he sat down and he thought about it and he said, gee, there's a problem with Thales' theory. The problem being, how can water produce land? Because water is wet. Land is dry. How does a wet thing make dryness? If everything is water, how does anything become dry? Everything is wet. How does it become dry? If you think about it, if you're on the beach, you're on the land. It's during the summer. We can all remember back to the summer. You're on the beach, you're on the land, you're barefoot, it's hot. You go into the water, it's cold. So in those days, they always thought cold was a certain, characteristic and has an opposite, the hot. So the question is, how does the cold water produce the hot land? How does that work? And Anaximander thinks that Thales' theory about water can't possibly explain that. And then in those days, they used to talk about all kinds of opposites composing things. But if you look at it, it's not going to come up with an answer. So he proposes a different basic ingredient. He has something in Greek, it's called apiron. It's a Greek word. It's translated as the boundless or the indefinite, sometimes as the infinite. And by the way, when you're thinking about these things, don't think about it as these are little like particles of, if it's Thales, if it's water. It's not that they're little particles of water. Particles is a much later concept. Remember when Thales said everything was water, it's literally everything. It's all the same. It's one thing. Similarly, here Anaximander is going to say that this thing is all the same thing. And it's this apiron. Now notice, he doesn't want to take one of the traditional elements. That is, back in ancient Greece, they used to say that everything was made up of water, earth, air, and fire. I think this perhaps was part of the mythology. Not quite sure where that came from. But this apiron was something different. Because, you notice, when we were worried about water and land, we were talking about opposites. Wet, dry, cold, hot. If you think about all of these kinds of opposite qualities, Anaximander's objection to Thales' theory is, wait a second, you can't, things that have a certain quality can't produce the opposite. Or how? Or the question is, how does it produce the opposite? And he thinks it can, so he thinks there's a real problem with Thales' theory. And that's why he's saying, well, wait a second, if we start with this one ingredient that contains all of the opposites that we could possibly think of, hot, cold, wet, dry, solid, liquid, any kind of opposites, different qualities, we kind of bound them all together and we end up with this mixture of stuff, this apiron. And it's kind of an interesting idea because even nowadays, when scientists talk about the way the Earth was formed, at least, right, they tell you that everything started out as sort of all the material there was kind of all mixed up. And even think of the biblical explanation. Everything was, in a state of mixture. There wasn't a division between light and dark, between land and water, etc. Just everything was kind of mixed up. So it's interesting that his basic ingredient is this same kind of thing, this apiran, the boundless. That is, it's not bound by wet or dry, not bound by hot and cold. It doesn't have definite characteristics.